I am Eleanor Adams, 35 years old, and a district court judge in this county for 3 years now. This morning I am preparing for a special hearing, one that will bring my estranged sister Heather face to face with me for the first time in years. The twist: she has no idea I will be the judge presiding over her case. Our relationship fractured years ago, but nothing prepared me for what would happen when she saw me on the bench. Before I tell you about this shocking confrontation, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe so you never miss true life stories like this one. Growing up, Heather was 5 years younger than me, a gap that meant I was often more of a third parent than a sister. Our mother Martha worked night shifts as a nurse at Memorial Hospital, while our father James taught history at the local high school. Those early years were happy ones, filled with the ordinary joys of childhood. I would brush Heather's hair before school, help her with homework, and defend her from playground bullies. She looked up to me with that special kind of admiration that only younger siblings can have. Everything changed when I was 16, and Heather was 11. Our father was driving home from a school event when a drunk driver ran a red light. The impact killed him instantly. I still remember Mom sitting us down in the living room, her eyes hollow from crying, telling us that Dad was never coming home again. That night, I held Heather as she sobbed herself to sleep, making a silent promise to always protect her. With Dad gone, Mom had to work even more shifts to keep us afloat financially. The responsibility of caring for Heather fell heavily on my shoulders. I made her meals, checked her homework, and tried to fill the void our father left. In those first months, Heather clung to me like a lifeline. But as time passed, something shifted. The preteen years are difficult enough without losing a parent, and Heather began to resent my authority. "You are not Mom," she would snap when I asked about her homework or told her to be home by 9. "Stop trying to act like you are in charge of me." Each time she lashed out, I tried to remember she was grieving, that her anger was just pain in disguise, but her words still stung. While Heather was pushing back against my attempts to parent her, I was throwing myself into my studies. Education became my escape and my future. By senior year, I was top of my class, president of the debate team, and focused on getting a scholarship to law school. My high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Lawrence, saw potential in me that I barely recognized in myself. "Eleanor, you have what it takes to be an exceptional lawyer someday," she told me during one of our college planning sessions. "Your analytical mind, your sense of justice, your ability to articulate complex thoughts clearly, these are gifts." When I received a full scholarship to State University pre-law program, it felt like the first piece of good news our family had received in years. Mom was proud, though, exhausted from her endless shifts. Heather, however, saw my achievement as abandonment. "So you are just going to leave us?" she accused the night I shared my news. "Mom works all the time, and now you are running away too." "I am not running away," I tried to explain. "This is an opportunity for me to build a better future for all of us." "Whatever helps you sleep at night," she muttered, slamming her bedroom door. The summer before I left for college, Mom met Patrick Douglas, a pharmaceutical sales representative who stopped by the hospital regularly. Their relationship moved quickly, and by Christmas of my freshman year, they were engaged. Patrick was charming when he wanted to be, but I sensed something disingenuous about him from our first meeting. He seemed particularly interested in the life insurance money my father had left. Mom had been carefully saving for our education. Patrick and I never got along, but he developed an unusual bond with Heather, where he was dismissive and sometimes openly hostile toward me. He showered Heather with gifts and attention. He positioned himself as the fun parent, undermining the rules Mom had established and painting me as uptight and controlling whenever I expressed concern. "Your sister is just jealous," I overheard him telling Heather once. "Some people just cannot stand to see others happy." By the time I returned home for summer break after my sophomore year, our family dynamic had completely transformed. Mom seemed smaller, somehow deferring to Patrick on decisions that she would have made independently before. Heather, now 14, treated me like an unwelcome guest in what had once been our home. Patrick says you think you are too good for us now, that you go to that fancy school, Heather informed me one evening, as I washed dishes. That is not true, I said, hurt by the accusation. I miss you guys every day. Heather just rolled her eyes, a gesture that would become increasingly familiar in our interactions. Sure you do. The wedding happened that August, a small ceremony in our backyard. I stood beside Mom smiling for photos while Patrick whispered something in Heather's ear that made her glare at me throughout the reception. Something irreparable was happening to our relationship, and I felt powerless to stop it. When I returned to school for my junior year, the phone calls home became less frequent. Heather rarely came to the phone when I asked for her, and when she did, her responses were monosyllabic and cold. With each visit home, the distance between us grew, cultivated carefully by Patrick's subtle comments and Heather's teenage resentment. By the time I graduated and moved on to law school, we were practically strangers, sharing a history that neither of us seemed to remember the same way. Law school was even more demanding than I had anticipated. I worked through holidays, took summer classes, and barely slept during finals week. When other students went home for breaks, I stayed behind to work as a research assistant for Professor Elizabeth Hamilton, a brilliant constitutional law expert who became my mentor. The rare times I did make it home, Heather was usually out with friends or holed up in her room, making it clear she had no interest in catching up. During my second year of law school, I met Thomas Winters, a fellow law student with a quick wit and ambitious plans for his future. We started dating, spending late nights quizzing each other on case law, and dreaming about the difference we would make in the justice system. For the first time since my father died, I felt like I was part of something meaningful, building a life I could be proud of. Meanwhile, Heather was spiraling. She started skipping school, her grades plummeted, and Mom called me in tears more than once about finding alcohol hidden in her room. By 17, she had dropped out of high school entirely, despite my offers to help her study for her GED or explore community college options. Not everyone wants to be a stuck-up bookworm like you, she told me, during one of my attempts to discuss her future. Some of us have actual lives. A month after her 18th birthday, Heather announced she was moving in with her boyfriend, Ryan Cooper, a 25-year-old mechanic. She had been dating secretly for months. Mom was distraught, but Patrick convinced her that trying to stop Heather would only push her further away. I was in my final year of law school, buried in bar exam preparation, when I got the call that Heather and Ryan had eloped to Las Vegas. She is too young, I told Mom over the phone, pacing my small apartment. She does not even know who she is yet. Your sister knows exactly what she wants, Mom replied, sounding tired. Patrick thinks we should support her choices. Of course Patrick thought that. The further Heather moved from our family, the more control he had over Mom and the family finances. I bit my tongue, knowing that criticizing Patrick would only create more distance between Mom and me. After passing the bar exam, I accepted a position as an assistant district attorney in the same county where I grew up. The salary was modest compared to what corporate law firms offered, but I was drawn to criminal prosecution, to the idea of seeking justice for victims and holding wrongdoers accountable. Thomas and I broke up shortly after graduation, when he took a high-paying job with a firm 3 states away. We both recognized that our careers would always come first, making a long-distance relationship impractical. My first apartment was a small 1-bedroom near the courthouse, furnished with second-hand pieces I found at thrift stores. On my first day as an ADA, I called Mom to share my excitement, hoping she might pass the phone to Heather so I could tell her too. Instead, Mom informed me that Heather and Ryan had moved to a different town about 40 minutes away. She is not really talking to any of us right now, Mom explained. Ryan thinks we judge their lifestyle. I tried to maintain some connection with my sister. I sent birthday cards, Christmas gifts, and occasional text messages checking in. Most went unanswered. The few responses I received were brief and dismissive. 2 years into my job as an ADA, I ran into Heather unexpectedly at a gas station. I almost did not recognize her. The weight loss, the dark circles under her eyes, the nervous way she kept looking over her shoulder. When I called her name, she flinched before, forcing a smile. Eleanor. Wow, still saving the world one criminal at a time. Her tone was bitter, but I noticed a bruise partially hidden by her collar. Heather, are you okay? I asked quietly, gesturing subtly to the bruise. Her hand flew to her neck, eyes darting around. I am fine. Ryan and I had a disagreement. That is all. Not that it is any of your business. If he is hurting you, there are resources people who can help, I said, reaching for my purse to find a card for the domestic violence center I worked with regularly. God, you are unbelievable, she hissed, backing away. Always looking for problems. Always thinking you know better than everyone else. Ryan loves me. We are happy. Just because your relationship failed does not mean you get to sabotage mine. I am not trying to sabotage anything. I am worried about you. Save it for your courtroom speeches, she snapped, abandoning her shopping basket and heading for the door. Stay out of my life, Eleanor. I called Mom that night, expressing my concerns about what I had seen. She sighed heavily. Patrick spoke with Ryan. He said Heather fell carrying groceries. You know how clumsy she can be. Mom, that is what abusers always say, and victims often cover for them. This is literally what I deal with every day at work. Eleanor, please. Patrick says we need to respect their marriage. Not everything is a case for you to prosecute. A week later, Heather called me, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you try to convince Mom that Ryan is abusing me? Patrick told us everything. You have always been jealous that I found love while you are alone with your precious career. Stay out of my marriage or I swear I will make sure you never see me or Mom again. She hung up before I could respond. The next major family event was the wedding of my cousin Emily. I was surprised to receive an invitation given how distant I had become from the extended family. When I arrived at the reception, I spotted Heather and Ryan across the room. Heather looked healthier than she had at the gas station, laughing at something Ryan whispered in her ear. When she saw me, her smile vanished. She spent the entire evening avoiding me, leaving any area I entered, making it clear that my presence was unwelcome. 6 months later, Mom called to tell me Heather was pregnant. I sent a handmade baby blanket and a card congratulating her, hoping this new life might somehow bridge the gap between us. The package was returned unopened with "Return to sender" scrawled across it in Heather's handwriting. When Ashley Cooper was born, I learned about it through a Facebook post by a mutual cousin. I was not invited to visit, not included in the family photos that circulated. My niece was growing up without knowing I existed. Each milestone I missed another brick in the wall between my sister and me. The day I received the call about my nomination for a judgeship, I was 35 years old and had spent nearly a decade as a prosecutor. My reputation for fairness and thoroughness had caught the attention of the Judicial Nomination Committee, and after a rigorous vetting process, I was selected to fill a vacancy on the district court bench. The appointment was an honor few attorneys achieve, especially at my age. The investiture ceremony was held in the main courtroom of the county courthouse, the same room where I had tried my first case as a young prosecutor. My colleagues from the district attorney's office filled several rows along with defense attorneys I had faced across the aisle, all setting aside adversarial roles to celebrate this milestone. Professor Hamilton had driven 3 hours to be there, beaming with pride as I took my oath. The absence of family was conspicuous. I had sent invitations to Mom, Patrick, and Heather, not expecting them to come, but unable to exclude them from such a significant moment in my life. As I scanned the audience while giving my acceptance speech, I tried not to focus on the empty seats in the front row that should have held my family. I pledged to uphold the law with integrity, to treat every person who enters this courtroom with dignity and respect, and to remember always that justice must be both fair and compassionate. I concluded to a standing ovation from my professional community. At the reception afterward, colleagues introduced me to their spouses and children, reinforcing how solitary my path had been. I had dated occasionally over the years, but relationships always took a back seat to my career ambitions. That night, returning to my empty house, I had upgraded from the apartment a few years earlier. I felt both immensely proud and profoundly alone. 2 weeks after my appointment, Mom called to ask if we could meet for coffee. It had been months since we had seen each other in person, our relationship reduced to occasional phone calls and text messages on holidays. We met at a small cafe halfway between our homes. Mom looking older than her 59 years, the stress of recent years etched into the lines around her eyes. "Congratulations on becoming a judge," she said after we ordered. Patrick saw the announcement in the paper. "Thank you," I replied, noting that she had not said she was proud, just acknowledging the fact. "How are you? How is Heather?" Mom's expression clouded. "That is part of why I wanted to meet. Heather and Ryan are having some problems, financial mostly, but other things too." As she spoke, I learned that Ryan had left Heather 6 months ago, moving to another state with a woman he met at work. He had emptied their joint bank account before leaving Heather and 4-year-old Ashley virtually penniless. Heather had moved back in with Mom and Patrick temporarily, but tensions were high. "Patrick thinks she needs to stand on her own 2 feet, Mom explained, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "He says we cannot support her forever, but she does not have a high school diploma and childcare costs more than she could make at most jobs." "I can help," I offered immediately. "I could send money for Ashley's expenses, or help Heather get her GED, or even pay for a lawyer to go after Ryan for child support." Mom shook her head. "I mentioned that you might be able to help, and, well, Heather did not take it well. She said she would rather live on the street than take handouts from you." The rejection stung, but it was not surprising. "Why does she hate me so much, Mom? What did I ever do, except try to succeed and offer help when I could?" Mom looked down at her coffee cup. "She thinks everything came easy to you. The scholarships, the career, the recognition. She does not see how hard you worked. And Patrick, well, he has never been your biggest fan." "That is an understatement," I said dryly. "He tells Heather things," sometimes Mom admitted, looking uncomfortable, "about how you must have connections to get appointed as a judge so young, how people like you step on others to get ahead." I felt the familiar mixture of hurt and anger that conversations about Patrick always provoked. "And you let him say these things. You know they are not true." "I am caught in the middle, Eleanor. I love both my daughters. I love my husband. I cannot constantly be the referee." We parted with a stiff hug, Mom promising to let me know if Heather changed her mind about accepting help. Driving home, I wondered when exactly my family had become strangers, and whether there was any path back to the closeness we once shared. In the months that followed, I immersed myself in my new role as judge. The learning curve was steep, the responsibility sometimes overwhelming, but I found deep satisfaction in ensuring that my courtroom was a place where justice was administered fairly and compassionately. I developed a reputation for thoroughness, for reading every document in every case file, for giving each matter before me, no matter how small, my complete attention. Outside the courtroom, my life remained solitary. I had a small circle of friends, mostly other legal professionals who understood the demands of the job. I volunteered with a literacy program at the local library, on weekends finding joy in helping children discover the escape and empowerment that books had provided me in my own childhood. Occasionally, I would hear rumors about things Patrick or Heather had said about me in the community. A court clerk who attended the same church as my mother reported overhearing Patrick tell someone I had political connections that secured my judgeship. A legal assistant mentioned that she had run into Heather at a grocery store, and my sister had made a disparaging comment about people who think they are better than everyone else because they wear robes to work. These stories hurt, but I pushed the pain aside, focusing instead on the cases before me. I had learned to compartmentalize, to separate my professional self from the personal wounds that never seemed to heal. One Tuesday morning, my judicial assistant, Susan, placed a new case file on my desk, Family Court Matter Judge Adams. Custody Dispute Emergency Hearing scheduled for Friday. I nodded, adding it to my stack of files to review that evening. It was not until I got home, settled into my home office with a cup of tea, that I opened the file and saw the name on the petition: Cooper Heather versus Cooper Christine. Re-custody of minor child Ashley Cooper. My heart stopped. Heather was involved in a custody battle with her former mother-in-law over Ashley, and I was assigned to be the judge. The ethical dilemma was immediate and overwhelming. As a judge, I was required to recuse myself from cases involving family members, or where my impartiality might reasonably be questioned. But the rural nature of our judicial district meant that emergency reassignments were complicated. All other judges had full dockets, and postponing an emergency custody hearing could have serious consequences for the child involved. I spent hours that night reviewing the Code of Judicial Conduct, searching for guidance. Early the next morning, I requested a meeting with Chief Judge Diana Wright, a seasoned jurist who had become a mentor since my appointment. "Eleanor," she greeted me, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Susan said it was urgent. I placed the file on her desk. "I have been assigned a case involving my estranged sister, a custody matter." Judge Wright raised her eyebrows, opening the file. "Heather Cooper is your sister?" "Yes. We have not spoken in years. She actively dislikes me, actually." "That complicates things," she acknowledged, scanning the documents. "Normally recusal would be automatic, but we are short-staffed with Judge Brewer on medical leave and Judge Patel at that conference in Washington." "I know. That is why I wanted your guidance. The hearing is set for Friday. Already notice has gone out to the parties. Postponement would mean at least a 2-week delay." Judge Wright leaned back in her chair, studying me thoughtfully. "What does your gut tell you, Eleanor? Can you be impartial in this case?" I considered the question carefully. I believe I can judge the facts objectively. My concern is more about the appearance of impropriety and about how Heather will react when she sees me on the bench. "Has she requested your recusal?" "She does not know I am assigned to the case yet. Given our history, I suspect she would." Judge Wright tapped her pen against the desk, thinking. "Here is what I suggest. Review the file thoroughly. If you find you cannot be objective for any reason, we will figure out a reassignment despite the logistical challenges. If you believe you can rule based solely on the facts and the law, proceed with the hearing." "And if Heather objects to my presence?" I asked. "You consider her objection as you would any other recusal request, based on its legal merit rather than emotional content," Judge Wright replied firmly. "This is not about your relationship as sisters. This is about whether justice can be properly served." I nodded, gathering the file. "Thank you, Diana." "Eleanor," she called as I reached the door. "Remember that sometimes the hardest decisions we make are the ones where personal and professional ethics intersect. Trust your training." Back in my chambers, I began a thorough review of the case file. The more I read, the more concerned I became about Ashley's situation. According to the petition filed by Christine Cooper, Ryan's mother Heather had been evicted from her apartment 3 times in the past year for non-payment of rent. Ashley had missed numerous days of kindergarten, and a teacher had reported the child often came to school hungry and in unwashed clothes. Most concerning there was a police report documenting an incident where Ashley had been found wandering alone at a local park nearly half a mile from Heather's apartment, while my sister was allegedly asleep at home. Christine Cooper was requesting temporary custody, claiming Heather's instability and neglect put Ashley at risk. Attached to her petition were affidavits from Ashley's teacher, a pediatrician who had treated Ashley for malnutrition, and neighbors who attested to seeing Ashley unsupervised on multiple occasions. Heather's response to the petition filed by a public defender denied the allegations of neglect and claimed Christine was vindictive and trying to replace her missing son with his daughter. The response included character statements from friends, but lacked concrete evidence refuting the documented incidents. That night, I barely slept, torn between my duty as a judge and my complicated feelings as a sister. If the allegations were true, Ashley's welfare was at serious risk. If I recused myself, and the hearing was delayed, that risk would continue. Yet I knew that seeing me on the bench would likely send Heather into a rage that could damage her case further. The morning before the hearing, I called my judicial assistant. "Susan, the Cooper custody case. Tomorrow, the parties have not been informed who the presiding judge will be, correct?" "That is right, Judge Adams. We never disclose the assigned judge for family court matters until the hearing begins. Court policy to prevent ex parte attempts to influence outcomes." "Good. Please make sure security is aware we may have a volatile situation in the courtroom tomorrow. No specific concerns, just a precaution." "Of course, Judge. I will speak with Bailiff Johnson." I hung up staring at my reflection in the office window. The woman looking back at me appeared confident, professional. A black robe draped over her shoulders, signifying authority and impartiality. But beneath that exterior was still the girl who had braided her little sister's hair and promised to always protect her. "What would Dad think of us now?" I whispered to my reflection, receiving no answer but the silent echo of my own doubt. The morning of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual. The ritual of preparation calmed me, donning the robe, reviewing my notes one final time, ensuring the courtroom was properly set up. Bailiff Johnson checked in, confirming he would be present throughout the proceedings. "Any specific concerns I should know about, Judge Adams?" he asked. "One of the parties may be unhappy to see me presiding," I explained vaguely. "Just be prepared for a potentially emotional reaction." As the clock ticked closer to 9 a.m., I sat in my chambers taking deep breaths and centering myself in the principles that had guided my legal career. Whatever happened next, I would ensure that Ashley's best interests remained the priority. That was what mattered most, regardless of the personal cost. At precisely 9 a.m., I nodded to Bailiff Johnson. He opened the door to my chambers and announced, "All rise. The Honorable Judge Eleanor Adams presiding." I stepped into the courtroom, my expression neutral, my heart racing beneath the calm exterior. The moment of confrontation I had both dreaded and prepared for was seconds away. The courtroom was more crowded than usual for a family court matter. In addition to the parties and their attorneys, several social workers, a guardian ad litem for Ashley, and what appeared to be family supporters for both sides, filled the gallery. The tension in the air was palpable, even before I entered. As I took my seat at the bench, I scanned the room professionally, not allowing my gaze to linger on any one person. Christine Cooper sat on the left side with her attorney Sarah Barnes, a well-respected family law practitioner I had encountered many times before. They both rose respectfully as I entered, their expressions neutral. On the right side, Heather sat beside her public defender, Nicholas Parker, a young attorney, relatively new to family court. Heather was looking down at some papers, not yet aware of who had entered the courtroom. She had changed since I last saw her. Her blonde hair was shorter, with dark roots showing, and she had lost weight she could not afford to lose. The years had not been kind to my little sister. "Good morning," I began, keeping my voice steady and professional. "This is case number FC 20250734, Cooper v. Cooper, regarding custody of minor child Ashley Cooper. Counsel, please state your appearances for the record." Sarah Barnes stood first. "Sarah Barnes for the petitioner, Christine Cooper, Your Honor." Nicholas Parker rose next. "Nicholas Parker, Public Defender's Office, representing the respondent, Heather Cooper." As he spoke, Heather finally looked up. Our eyes met, and I watched the progression of emotions across her face: shock, confusion, disbelief, and finally white-hot fury. Her mouth fell open, then snapped shut. Her hands gripped the table so hard her knuckles turned white. Before we begin, I continued maintaining my judicial demeanor. "I want to remind everyone that this is a court of law and appropriate decorum is expected at all times. The welfare of the child is our primary concern today." Heather shot to her feet, ignoring her attorney's attempt to pull her back down. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, her voice shrill with anger. "She cannot be the judge. She is my sister." Nicholas Parker looked between Heather and me, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Your Honor, I was not aware of any familial relationship between yourself and my client." Before I could respond, Heather continued, her voice rising with each word. "This is a setup. She has always hated me, always tried to control me. She cannot be objective." "Miss Cooper," I said firmly, "please lower your voice and address the court with respect, or you will be held in contempt." "Respect?" Heather laughed bitterly. "You want respect when you are sitting up there pretending to be important. You worthless manipulative." Miss Cooper, Bailiff Johnson, stepped forward, his presence a reminder of the authority of the court. Nicholas Parker was frantically whispering to Heather, trying to calm her, but she shook him off. "I want her removed," Heather shouted, pointing at me. "She is a fraud. She is just here to take my daughter away because she never had kids of her own. She is worthless scum, pretending to be someone important." The courtroom had gone completely silent except for Heather's voice. Christine Cooper looked stunned while Sarah Barnes was scribbling notes rapidly, likely documenting Heather's outburst for later use in her arguments. I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. "Miss Cooper, I understand this is a surprise to you. However, your behavior is inappropriate for this courtroom. I am going to give you one opportunity to compose yourself and proceed professionally. If you cannot do so, you will be held in contempt of court." Heather's face was flushed with rage. "You cannot judge my case. It is a conflict of interest. Someone get a real judge in here." Nicholas Parker finally managed to get Heather's attention. "Miss Cooper, please sit down. Let me handle this legally." He turned to address me. "Your Honor, given the apparently close familial relationship, we respectfully request your recusal from this case." I nodded, acknowledging the request. "Counsel, I appreciate your concern. However, while Miss Cooper and I are indeed sisters, we have had no meaningful contact for approximately 7 years. I have reviewed the ethical guidelines thoroughly and consulted with the Chief Judge. There is no automatic disqualification required in this circumstance, particularly given the emergency nature of this hearing and the limited judicial resources currently available in our district." Parker looked uncertain. "Your Honor, with all due respect, the emotional outburst we just witnessed suggests there may be complex family dynamics that could affect the proceedings. Counselor, I can assure you that I will judge this case solely on its merits and the best interests of the child. Miss Cooper's behavior today will not prejudice me against her case." I paused, then added, "However, continued disruptions will not be tolerated. Now, shall we proceed with the hearing, or do you wish to file a formal motion for recusal, understanding that would delay these proceedings by at least 2 weeks? Parker glanced at Heather, who was still seething, but had finally sat down. "We will proceed, Your Honor, but note our objection for the record." "So noted," I replied. "Miss Barnes, you may present the petitioner's case." Sarah Barnes rose gracefully. "Thank you, Your Honor. We are here today because my client, Christine Cooper, is gravely concerned about the welfare of her granddaughter, Ashley Cooper. Over the past year, there have been multiple incidents suggesting that the respondent, Heather Cooper, is unable to provide a safe, stable environment for her daughter." As Barnes methodically presented her case, calling witnesses, including Ashley's kindergarten teacher Lillian Johnson, I maintained a neutral expression, taking careful notes and asking clarifying questions when appropriate. "Miss Johnson, how often would you say Ashley comes to school without having had breakfast?" I asked after the teacher described Ashley's frequent hunger. "At least 3 days a week, Your Honor. We keep granola bars in the classroom for her now." "And have you discussed this concern with Miss Cooper?" "Yes, several times. She usually says they were running late, or that Ashley refuses to eat at home, but Ashley is always hungry when she arrives." Heather's attorney cross-examined each witness, but his inexperience showed. He focused on minor inconsistencies rather than addressing the pattern of neglect being established by the testimony. The pediatrician, Dr. Melissa Wright, testified next. "Ashley was brought to my office by her grandmother after she noticed the child had lost weight. Examination revealed mild malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies consistent with an inadequate diet. "Did you speak with Miss Cooper about these findings?" I asked. "I attempted to, Your Honor, but she became defensive and accused me of calling her a bad mother. She left the office before we could discuss a nutrition plan." As the evidence mounted, Heather grew increasingly agitated, whispering angrily to her attorney and shaking her head at testimony she disagreed with. The most damning evidence came from Officer Daniel Martinez, who had responded to the call about Ashley being found alone at the park. The child was approximately 4 blocks from her residence, he testified. A concerned citizen called when they noticed her playing alone near the pond. When we located Miss Cooper, she was asleep in her apartment and unaware that Ashley had left. She stated she had worked a late shift and was exhausted. "Was there evidence of substance abuse or alcohol use?" I inquired, knowing this was a critical factor. "No drugs were observed, Your Honor, but Miss Cooper appeared disoriented and there was an empty wine bottle visible in the living room." Heather's attorney called character witnesses, including her friend, Brittany Turner, who testified that Heather was a loving mother, doing her best in difficult circumstances. But even these supportive witnesses acknowledged they had observed concerning behaviors. "She loves Ashley more than anything," Brittany insisted. "But yes, sometimes she gets overwhelmed. Being a single mom is hard." Throughout the testimony, I directed questions to both sides, with equal thoroughness, careful not to show any bias toward or against my sister. When Heather finally took the stand, I addressed her with the same formal courtesy I had shown all witnesses. "Miss Cooper, could you please describe your current living situation and employment status?" Heather glared at me, her hostility palpable. "Like you care. This whole thing is just you trying to prove you were right all along." "Miss Cooper," I said evenly, "please answer the question. Your current living arrangement and employment." "I am staying with a friend temporarily. I have a job interview next week at the mall. I am doing the best I can since Ryan abandoned us." "The court records show 3 evictions in the past year. Can you explain what led to those housing changes?" "Money got tight." Ryan stopped sending support. "Not everyone has a fancy job and a big house like some people." The personal jabs continued throughout her testimony, but I refused to react to them, instead focusing on extracting the factual information needed to make my decision. When Christine Cooper testified about her relationship with Ashley and her concerns about Heather's parenting, I was equally rigorous in my questioning. "Mrs. Cooper, how often have you cared for Ashley over the past year?" "Almost every weekend, Your Honor. And sometimes during the week, when Heather has night shifts, Ashley has her own room at my house." "And have you attempted to help Miss Cooper with her housing and financial challenges?" "Yes, I offered to let them both live with me, but Heather refused. I have also offered financial help, which she sometimes accepts and sometimes does not." As the hearing approached its 3rd hour, an unexpected voice called from the gallery. "I would like to speak on behalf of my stepdaughter." Patrick Douglas stood up, his presence, a surprise even to Heather. After being sworn in, he launched into a defense of Heather that quickly devolved into attacks on my character. "Heather has always been the compassionate one, the one who puts family first," he stated, looking directly at me, "not like some people who abandon their families to chase ambition. Eleanor has always been jealous of Heather's natural warmth and ability to connect with people." "Mr. Douglas," I interrupted, "this testimony is not relevant to the custody matter before the court. Please restrict your comments to observations about Miss Cooper's parenting abilities and home environment." He smirked. "Of course you would say that. You cannot stand hearing the truth about yourself." "Mr. Douglas, this is your final warning. One more irrelevant or disrespectful comment, and you will be removed from the courtroom." He changed tactics, then claiming that Ashley was perfectly happy and healthy in Heather's care, that the teacher and doctor were exaggerating their concerns, and that Christine Cooper was vindictive and controlling. When both sides had presented their cases, I called for closing arguments. Sarah Barnes emphasized the pattern of neglect and instability, while Nicholas Parker argued that Heather was a loving mother facing temporary challenges who just needed support, not separation from her child. As Parker finished his argument, Heather suddenly rose again. "This is all a lie. She has wanted to destroy me for years. Ever since we were kids, Eleanor has thought she was better than me. Now she is going to use her power to take my daughter away." The outburst was exactly what I had feared but expected. In that moment, all the professional distance I had maintained threatened to collapse under the weight of familial pain. But I drew a deep breath, remembering Judge Wright's words about the intersection of personal and professional ethics. "Miss Cooper," I said quietly but firmly, "the court understands that these proceedings are emotional and difficult. However, outbursts of this nature do not help your case. They do, however, provide insight into the emotional environment in which Ashley is being raised." Heather's face crumpled, then anger giving way to tears. "You have no idea what it is like," she sobbed. "You have your perfect life, your perfect career. You have never struggled like I have. You have never known what it feels like to fail at everything." For a brief moment the courtroom faded away, and I saw not the angry woman before me, but the little girl whose hair I had once braided, whose tears I had once wiped away. But Ashley's welfare depended on my ability to see clearly now, to judge fairly based on facts, rather than shared history or lingering love. This court will take a 30-minute recess to review all evidence and testimony before rendering a decision, I announced, rising from the bench. Court is in recess. In my chambers I reviewed my notes, meticulously examining each piece of evidence and testimony. The case was both more straightforward and more complicated than most custody matters I handled. The evidence of neglect was substantial and concerning. Multiple independent witnesses had testified to Ashley's unsafe living conditions, inadequate supervision, and physical signs of neglect, like hunger and poor hygiene. Yet I was acutely aware that every decision I made would be scrutinized for bias. If I ruled in favor of Christine Cooper, Heather would see it as confirmation of her accusations that I was using my position to punish her. If I ruled in her favor despite the evidence, I would be failing in my duty as a judge, and more importantly, potentially placing Ashley at continued risk. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting Susan with additional documents. Instead, Judge Wright entered, closing the door behind her. "I observed part of the hearing," she said without preamble. "Quite a situation you have there." "That is an understatement," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. "I am trying to focus solely on the evidence, but it is challenging when the respondent keeps making it personal." Judge Wright nodded. "I noticed. For what it is worth, I thought you handled her outbursts with remarkable restraint and professionalism." "Thank you," I said, genuinely appreciative of her support. "I am concerned about how my ruling will be perceived regardless of which way it goes." "Eleanor," she said, leaning forward in family court, "there are rarely decisions that make everyone happy. Our job is not to be popular or even understood. It is to protect those who cannot protect themselves, based on the evidence before us. You know this." "I do," I agreed. "The evidence in this case is clear. I am just struggling with the personal element." "Then, set it aside," she advised, rising to leave. "You are not Eleanor, the sister in that courtroom. You are Judge Adams, and your duty is to Ashley Cooper." When she was gone, I turned again to the file, reading through the Guardian ad litem's report one more time. Lisa Martinez, the experienced social worker appointed to represent Ashley's interests, had spent time with the child in both homes and interviewed her teachers, doctors, and both potential guardians. Her recommendation was unequivocal: temporary custody should be granted to Christine Cooper, with supervised visitation for Heather, pending Heather's completion of parenting classes and establishment of stable housing and employment. The decision crystallized in my mind. It was what I would have ruled in any similar case, regardless of who sat at the respondent's table. With clarity came a measure of peace. I was not betraying my sister. I was fulfilling my oath to uphold the law and protect the vulnerable. When I returned to the courtroom, the tension had escalated. Heather was in a heated, whispered conversation with Nicholas Parker, while Patrick was openly glaring at me from the gallery. Christine Cooper sat quietly beside her attorney, hands folded in her lap, her expression one of resigned determination. "Court is now in session," Bailiff Johnson announced as I took my seat. After careful review of all testimony and evidence presented today, I began, my voice steady and formal. This court must make its determination based on one paramount consideration: the welfare and best interests of Ashley Cooper. I outlined the evidence, methodically acknowledging both the concerning patterns of neglect and the clear love Heather had for her daughter. I noted Christine Cooper's stable home environment, consistent presence in Ashley's life, and willingness to facilitate a relationship between Ashley and her mother. The court finds that the petitioner has presented substantial evidence that the minor child's current living situation presents risks to her health, safety, and welfare, I continued. While the court recognizes Miss Heather Cooper's love for her daughter and the challenges she has faced as a single parent, the pattern of instability and inadequate supervision cannot be overlooked. Heather made a small wounded sound but remained seated, her attorney's hand firmly on her arm. Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that temporary legal and physical custody of Ashley Cooper is granted to Christine Cooper for a period of 6 months, during which time Heather Cooper will have supervised visitation twice weekly. I outlined the conditions for Heather to potentially regain custody: completion of a parenting class, securing stable housing and employment, and regular meetings with a family counselor. I also ordered Christine to ensure that Ashley maintained a relationship with her mother and to facilitate the supervised visits. This arrangement will be reassessed in 6 months, at which time the court will evaluate Miss Cooper's progress and determine whether modification of the custody arrangement is warranted. As I finished reading my ruling, Heather finally erupted, unable to contain herself any longer. "How could you do this to me?" she cried, tears streaming down her face. "You have taken everything from me. First Mom's attention, then Dad's love, and now my daughter." Patrick stood as well, pointing at me accusingly. "This is a disgrace. A judge using her position to settle family scores." "Mr. Douglas, you are out of order," I stated firmly. "Bailiff, please escort Mr. Douglas from the courtroom." As Bailiff Johnson moved toward Patrick, Heather continued her tirade, years of resentment pouring out in front of the shocked courtroom. "You have always thought you were better than me. The perfect daughter, the brilliant student, the successful career woman, and now you sit up there in judgment of me. You have no idea what my life has been like in your shadow." Nicholas Parker was trying desperately to calm Heather, but she shook him off. "You never had time for me. You left for college and forgot I existed. When Ryan hit me, you tried to control that situation too. Instead of just supporting me, you have never just been my sister. You have always been my judge." Her words hit home in a way she could not have intended. I had always seen myself as trying to help, to protect, to support. But through her eyes, my attempts at assistance had felt like judgment, my success like an indictment of her struggles. "Miss Cooper," I said, maintaining my judicial tone with effort, "your feelings about our personal history are not relevant to this court's decision regarding Ashley's custody. The ruling is based solely on the evidence presented today regarding Ashley's welfare." "Bullshit," she sobbed the word, echoing in the hushed courtroom. "This is personal, and you know it." "Heather," I said briefly, dropping the formal address, "this is not the time or place to address our history. This ruling is about Ashley's needs, not yours or mine." "Of course it is," she said bitterly. "It is always about what you think is best for everyone else." Nicholas Parker finally managed to guide Heather back to her seat, whispering urgently in her ear. Christine Cooper looked shaken by the outburst but relieved by the ruling. "This court stands adjourned," I announced, rising quickly and retreating to my chambers, where I finally allowed myself a moment of pure emotion, hands shaking, as I removed my robe. Susan appeared at my door. "Judge Adams, Miss Cooper's attorney, has requested a brief meeting with you in chambers. He is alone." I hesitated, then nodded. "Send him in." Nicholas Parker entered looking uncomfortable, but determined. "Your Honor, I want to apologize for my client's behavior. I was unaware of your relationship until today." "No apology necessary, Counselor. It was an emotional hearing." He shifted his weight. "With all due respect, Judge Adams, while I believe your ruling was legally sound based on the evidence, the optics of this situation are problematic. I am concerned about potential grounds for appeal based on the undisclosed familial relationship." "I understand your concern, Mr. Parker. However, I disclosed the relationship at the beginning of the hearing, and I offered you the opportunity to request formal recusal, which would have delayed proceedings. You chose to proceed." "Under pressure from my client," he acknowledged. "In retrospect, I should have insisted on postponement." "You are welcome to file whatever motions you believe appropriate," I told him. "But I can assure you that my ruling was based entirely on the evidence and the best interests of Ashley." After he left, I sat alone in my chambers, the weight of the day settling heavily on my shoulders. In upholding my judicial oath, I had likely severed any possibility of reconciliation with my sister. Yet I could not have ruled differently, without betraying my principles and potentially endangering Ashley. As I gathered my things to leave, there was another knock at my door. I opened it to find Heather standing there, eyes red from crying, no longer raging, but deflated and hollow. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly, a stark contrast to her courtroom fury. I hesitated, then stepped aside. "Yes." Heather entered my chambers slowly, her earlier fury replaced by exhaustion. She looked around the room, taking in the law books, the framed degrees, the formal portrait of me in my judicial robe. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, and she sat twisting her hands in her lap. "I hate that you saw me like that," she finally said, her voice hoarse from shouting. "I hate that everyone saw me like that." "It was a difficult day," I replied neutrally, unsure where this conversation was heading. Heather looked up, her eyes, still red, but clearer now. "Did you know it would be you? When I filed for the hearing, did you request my case specifically?" "No," I answered honestly. "It was assigned randomly. I considered recusal, but given the emergency nature of the hearing and our district's current judicial shortage, I consulted with the chief judge and determined I could be impartial." "Impartial," she repeated, a ghost of her earlier bitterness in the word. "How can you be impartial when it comes to me? You have judged me my entire life." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Heather, I have never judged you in the way you think. I have worried about you. I have tried to help you. I have missed you. But I have never thought I was better than you. You did not have to think it. Everyone else did. Dad was so proud when you won that debate championship. Mom bragged to her friends about your scholarship. Even after Dad died, it was all about how Eleanor was handling everything so well, being so strong, taking care of everyone. I was falling apart inside," I admitted quietly. "I just did not let anyone see it. I thought I had to be strong for you and Mom. Well, I could not be strong. I was a mess. And then you left." "For college," I pointed out. "Not forever. I tried to stay connected, Heather. You were the one who stopped taking my calls." "Because it hurt too much," she exclaimed, a flash of the old anger returning. "Every time we talked, you had some new accomplishment, some new success. And there I was, failing high school, making terrible decisions, feeling like a complete disappointment." The revelation stunned me. All these years I had thought her distance was born of resentment for my attempts to parent her. I never considered it might be pain at feeling inadequate by comparison. "I had no idea you felt that way," I said softly. "I always thought you were angry because I tried to step into a parental role after Dad died." "That too," she acknowledged with a weak laugh. "You were bossy as hell. but mostly it was easier to be angry than to feel like a failure every time I compared myself to you. And then Patrick came along, I said, the pieces finally fitting together. Heather nodded. He made me feel special, like I was the smart one, the talented one, the one who understood people. He always pointed out your flaws, how cold and ambitious you were, how you thought rules were more important than people. That is not who I am, I protested gently. I know that now, I think she admitted. Seeing you today, you were so professional, so calm even when I was horrible to you. And you're ruling. Her voice broke slightly. It was fair. I know I have not been the mother Ashley deserves lately. Tears welled in her eyes. I miss her already, and it has only been a few hours. This is temporary, Heather, I reminded her. 6 months. You can meet all the conditions I set. You can get her back. How I have no job, no apartment, no high school diploma, no money for the parenting classes. I hesitated, then made an offer I had made many times before, hoping this time would be different. I can help you. Not as a judge, but as your sister. I can help with the costs of the classes, maybe assist with finding an apartment. She looked suspicious. Why would you do that after everything I said today? After years of me treating you terribly? Because you are my sister, I said simply. Because I remember braiding your hair before school and reading you bedtime stories. Because despite everything, I have never stopped caring about you. Heather was quiet for a long moment. I do not know if I can accept your help. It feels like admitting defeat somehow. It is not defeat to accept help from family, I told her. It is what families are supposed to do, support each other through hard times. Even after I called you worthless scum in front of an entire courtroom, she asked, a hint of dark humor in her voice. Even then, I confirmed, though I would appreciate if that did not become a regular form of address. A small smile flickered across her face. I do not think I have called you by your actual name in years. It was always her, or she, or worse. Well, Eleanor works. Judge Adams in court, please. The joke, small as it was, seemed to break something open between us. Not healing, not yet, but a crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. I really do want to be a good mother, Heather said after a moment. I love Ashley more than anything. When Ryan left us, something broke in me. I could not seem to get back on my feet. I know, I said. And the ruling today was not a judgment on your love for Ashley. It was about her immediate safety and stability, while you get the support you need. Heather nodded slowly. Christine is good to her. She will be okay there for a while. She looked up at me. Would you want to meet her sometime? Ashley, I mean. She is 6 now. The offer took my breath away. I would love that. Whenever you think it is appropriate. Maybe after one of my supervised visits, once we have talked to her about who you are. Her aunt, not just the judge who decided where she lives. I would like that very much. When Heather left my chambers that evening, nothing was resolved. The years of hurt, misunderstanding, and resentment could not be erased in a single conversation. But something had shifted. A door had opened that had been closed for far too long. Over the next 3 months, I kept my distance professionally from Heather's case, having another judge handle the progress reviews. But personally, I began to rebuild a relationship with my sister. I helped her find an apartment she could afford with her new job at a local bookstore. I paid for her parenting classes and drove her to sessions when her car broke down. Slowly, tentatively, we began to talk about the years we had lost, the misunderstandings that had driven us apart. Patrick was furious about our reconciliation, spreading rumors that I had blackmailed Heather into a relationship by holding her daughter hostage. But for the first time, Heather defended me, telling him firmly that he did not get to dictate her family relationships anymore. Mom was cautiously optimistic, joining us for dinner one evening, the 3 of us together for the first time in nearly a decade. The conversation was sometimes awkward, sometimes emotional, but by the end, we were looking at old family photos and even laughing at shared memories. At the 6-month review hearing presided over by Judge Wright, Heather was granted expanded visitation rights, including overnight stays with Ashley. Christine Cooper reported that Ashley was thriving with the new arrangement, feeling secure in her grandmother's home while maintaining a stronger relationship with her mother. 2 weeks later, Heather brought Ashley to my house for Sunday lunch. I was nervous as I opened the door, coming face to face with my niece for the first time. She had Heather's blonde hair and our father's thoughtful brown eyes. "Ashley, this is your Aunt Eleanor," Heather introduced me. "She is a judge but also my big sister." Ashley studied me seriously. "Mom says you used to braid her hair when she was little." "That is true," I confirmed. "I could braid yours too if you would like." She considered the offer with grave importance, then nodded. "Okay, but I want a French braid. Grandma Christine taught me that word." As I braided Ashley's hair after lunch, Heather watched us with a complicated expression, something between happiness and regret, for the years we had lost the relationship Ashley could have had with me from the beginning. "It is not too late," I told her quietly when Ashley went to explore my small garden. "We cannot get back the years that are gone, but we have time ahead of us." The journey of reconciliation was not a straight path. There were difficult conversations, setbacks, and moments when old resentments flared. But there was also healing understanding and the slow rebuilding of trust. I learned to listen more and advise less. Heather learned to see my success not as an indictment of her struggles, but simply as a different path. 1 year after that fateful court hearing, Heather regained primary custody of Ashley with Christine, remaining actively involved in her granddaughter's life. I was there the day Ashley moved back into Heather's apartment, now clean, stable, and filled with books and art supplies. The smile on my sister's face as she helped Ashley arrange her stuffed animals on her bed was worth every difficult moment of our journey. What I learned through this experience was that true justice is not blind to human complexity. It sees clearly the facts and evidence, but it also recognizes the capacity for growth and change. As a judge, I must apply the law impartially, but as a human being, I must never forget that behind every case file is a story. A person struggling, failing, trying, hoping. My sister called me worthless in court that day, but what she really meant was that she felt worthless in comparison. We both had to learn that worth is not measured by degrees or titles or perfect decisions. It is found in resilience, in the courage to face our failures, in the willingness to extend grace to others and ourselves. Sometimes, the most important judgments are not made from the bench, but in the quiet moments when we choose reconciliation over resentment, understanding over accusation, love over pride. The gavel may bring order to a courtroom, but only compassion can bring peace to a family. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision involving a family member? Did you prioritize what was right over what was easy? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story touched you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more stories about family forgiveness and finding your way back to the people who matter most. Thank you for listening to my story today, and remember that even the deepest wounds between family members can heal with time, truth, and the courage to begin again.